Hi, I'm Mark, and today we have to talk about the new hard policy of the British government against China and Russia. The government published its updated foreign policy principles in London. There are changes, especially in dealing with China and Russia. The paper states that the geopolitical situation has changed since 2021. Russia has invaded Ukraine, is using energy and food supplies as a weapon, and is threatening with nuclear missiles. And China is acting more and more aggressively towards Taiwan and is contributing to the conflict in the Indo-Pacific with global consequences. The release of Britain's new foreign policy principles coincided on the day with Prime Minister Sunak's visit to the United States. Sunak met with President Biden and Australian Prime Minister Albanese in San Diego. Among other things, they talked about their military alliance AUKUS, which is intended to counteract China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Shortly before the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, China and Russia agreed on comprehensive cooperation. Now, a renewed meeting of the two heads of state is to be planned. Great Britain wants to strictly counteract a possible security threat. Great Britain wants to resolutely counter threats from China and Russia. Fast and robust measures should counter any threat to national interests from Beijing, according to the revised British security strategy published by the government. Under the Communist Party, China poses an epochal and systematic challenge to almost every aspect of government policy and everyday life, said Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. London wants to work constructively with Beijing. However, this becomes more difficult the more authoritarian China behaves, the document said. Britain wants to counter Russia's malicious influence in the world by working with Russian neighbors from Mongolia to Central Asia to Moldova. At the same time, Russia's ability to threaten Great Britain should be dismantled. A key part of this is helping Ukraine restore its sovereignty and denying Russia any strategic benefit from its invasion, the strategy said. To this end, a new security agency called the National Protective Security Authority within the MI5 Secret Service is to advise British companies and other organizations on how to ward off foreign spies. Criticism from Sunak's Conservative Party was expected in the British media. In the summer, today's Prime Minister described China as the greatest long-term threat to Great Britain. And now he's more reserved. The strategy does not see China as a national threat per se. The British government presented a new strategy in 2021, and after the start of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, however, the document was now revised. Shortly before the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine over a year ago, China and Russia agreed, as I said, on a comprehensive cooperation, a borderless partnership as they called it. According to insiders, Chinese President Xi Jinping is now planning to travel to Moscow next week and meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin for talks. And this was said by several people familiar with the project who did not want to be named by media because of the sensitive subject. Initially, there was no comment from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Putin had already announced Xi's visit to Moscow in February when the top Chinese diplomat Wang Yi was in the Russian capital for consultations. As early as January 30th, the Russian news agency TASS reported that Putin had invited Xi to visit in the spring. In February, the Wall Street Journal reported that the visit could take place in April or early May. And Australia wants to buy up to 5 nuclear submarines from the USA as part of the AUKUS tripartite alliance and develop new nuclear submarines together with the USA and Great Britain. And that's another part of the new strategies. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the plan is to purchase 3 Virginia-class nuclear-powered and conventionally armed submarine. A purchase option for 2 more submarines is planned. U.S. submarines should therefore be delivered in the course of the 2030s. In addition, Australia, the USA and Great Britain want to develop a new generation of nuclear submarines together. According to Sullivan, these should also be nuclear-powered but conventionally armed. The project runs under the name SSN-AUKUS. And US President Biden also stressed that the deal with Great Britain and Australia does not include any nuclear weapons. The US government announced the deal shortly before the meeting of US President Joe Biden, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, I mentioned earlier. The three countries founded the AUKUS Indo-Pacific Security Alliance in September 2021 to counterbalance China's growing dominance in the region. Without the AUKUS agreement, the USA, Great Britain, and Australia want to counteract, they want to counteract the increased influence of China in the South Pacific. The region is increasingly becoming the arena of competition between China and the USA. The Chinese government has been trying to establish a larger military, political, and economic presence in the South Pacific for some time. And China has sharply criticized the alliance. The government in Beijing described this as dangerous and an attempt to corner in China, but they themselves now said they want to build their military to the Great Wall of China. The central element of this alliance are nuclear-powered submarines with which Australia wants to modernize its fleet. The deal is extremely important for Australia because the country itself does not have the know-how to build nuclear submarines. Nuclear-powered submarines can travel great distances and are difficult for the enemy to locate, although the German ones are even harder to locate, by the way, and they're not nuclear. A year and a half ago, when AUKUS was founded, Australia cancelled a long-planned multi-billion-dollar submarine deal with France, though. This had resulted in outraged reactions from the French government and temporarily put a massive strain on relations between Paris and Washington. And investing to be ready for the challenges of now and tomorrow is what's happening now everywhere. And Britain announced the investment in its own military on Sunday. As the world becomes more volatile and competition between countries intensifies, the UK must be ready to assert itself, is what British Prime Minister Sunak said of the decision. In total, investments in the armed forces of £5 billion are to be made over the next 2 years. And this breaks down as follows. Around £3 billion are to flow into nuclear defense projects such as the AUKUS Security Alliance with the USA and Australia. About £1.9 billion is earmarked for ammunition replenishment. The stock had recently fallen sharply due to support for Ukraine. According to Sunak, it became clear in 2022 how global crises would affect them. By this, he meant Russia's appalling invasion of Ukraine, which drove up energy and food prices. And this is to ensure that they are never again vulnerable to the actions of a hostile power, as he puts it. The money invested corresponds to about 1/20 of the money that Germany put into the Bundeswehr, or are planning to, because most of the money is still there. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz here in Germany announced a change of direction in German security and also foreign policy just a few days after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A special fund worth €100 billion was part of the modernization of the Bundeswehr. We are experiencing a turning point. A Zeitenwende is what Scholz said at the time. Almost a year later, however, a military commissioner drew a bad conclusion. The British Prime Minister is also concerned about foreign and security policy. As mentioned, Sunak's office issued a statement announcing an update to the relevant strategy paper. The review was launched to respond to geopolitical threats such as Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine or China's economic coercion. The cash injection is part of this strategy. According to Sunak's office, the investment should, among other things, help to replenish the ammunition stocks. That's a problem we know here in Germany as well. In January, British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace warned that the British Army was undermined and underfunded. Sunak said the increase would take defence spending from 2% to 2.25% of gross domestic product by 2025, and the goal is 2.5%. According to media reports, Secretary of Defence Ben Wallace had called for an increase to even 3%. It was only at the end of 2020 that London had announced its highest arms spending since the end of the Cold War. Britain is one of Ukraine's biggest supporters. There, however, the fighting continues relentlessly. Russia suffered heavy casualties, but is still not stopping this war. And just to mention this, there is one person who could stop this war immediately, and that's Vladimir Putin. But he doesn't. And so we will talk about also a new European security strategy for the future very soon. I'm absolutely sure about this, that I will talk about that a lot in the future on my magazine channel. Talking about other channels, I was talking about something new, and that will come soon, and sooner than I hoped. I hope the editing will work out as I'm planning it, because I'm working a hell of a lot at the moment every day. And I will do this after filming this and editing this video. I will edit a lot on the new videos that will be on the 2 new channels, one in English, one in German, where there will be 1 video a month, because it's that much of work. But if nothing goes wrong, the new videos will be out there on Saturday. And from that day, I will put the link to those channels in the video description. But if you want to have a look already on Saturday immediately, just have a look out for Outside Views Games and Outside Views Spiele in German. There, on Saturday, there should be the new videos. I'm not telling you much more now, but you will see. And today there is some interesting video on my book channels as well. I have one in German and in English. And this time I'm talking about State of Terror by Hillary Rodham Clinton and Louise Penny. And it's a very political book as well, and that's why I thought I should mention it here today as well. And that video came out this morning at 6 a.m. CET as well, just like this Brexit video. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.